was going to do with my life, pulled out a notebook that I had taken from school, and I wrote down a 15-step plan about how I was going to go from where I was sitting in a tent to a multimillionaire by the age of 30.
Wow.
And about step number, 13 out of that 15-step plan was to go get a job at Blizzard. And so that whole plan has actually been like one of my guiding stars for most of my life. And a lot of that was go learn how computers work, go learn how to do software development. I got into web development on the West Coast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Game Makers Lounge. Today, we have a really awesome guest, someone who I've been in touch with for a long time and really am amazed at how she can do two things really, really well in life, which we'll obviously get into. But welcome, Diane Cochran. Really, really excited to have you. Why don't we start by a quick intro so that everyone knows who you are, and then looking forward to diving in.
Sure. So my name is Diane Cochran. I'm software engineer. I've been doing it for about 25 years. And as what was just foreshadowed, have recently picked up some hobbies that is, I guess, one of the reasons why we're here talking about stuff.
Yeah. And so, you've been someone who's worked at Blizzard. Walk us through, your journey into gaming. How did it start? Why did you choose gaming? And you've spent tons of years at Blizzard, and then you've now joined a really exciting startup. Would love to hear that journey.
Yeah, so believe it or not, my journey into Blizzard is also my journey into software development. Ended up in a situation where at the age of 17, I was actually out on the street, high school dropout. And in that moment, I realized that if I wanted to not spend the rest of my days in some pretty terrible situations, that I needed to have a plan to get out of there. So I have like a huge story. I'll give you the condensed version, right? But basically, I was sitting in a tent and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. Pulled out a notebook that I had taken from school. And I wrote down a 15-step plan about how I was going to go from where I was sitting in a tent to a multimillionaire by the age of 30. Wow. And about step number, 13 out of that 15-step plan was to go get a job at Blizzard. So that whole plan has actually been like one of my guiding stars for most of my life. And a lot of that was go learn how computers work, go learn how to do software development. I got into web development on the West Coast, got into the financial sector down in the Irvine area, and basically just waited for the right moment. Got a position within Blizzard as a software engineer, very quickly rose to the ranks there to become a tech director. And I was the director of the web and mobile department, where we did some pretty cool things, some stuff like the Game Data API, which is a thing that if you are a fan site or you use a fan site of Blizzard games, you're probably touching things that I wrote, including things like the desktop app. And so that was like a pretty crazy journey to be able to get into there. Definitely a huge triumph of just persistence and sticking with things, and always just kind of guiding yourself to, is the next decision that I'm going to make, will it get me closer to what that ultimate goal is, or is it going to get me further away, right? Like I said, spent about a decade there, and then left in 2019, started trying to do my own endeavors, getting into more interesting projects, that kind of led into like some of the startups like Secret Entertainment, which is who I'm with right now.
I realize now that I am wildly disorganized. Hearing that you did a plan 20 years ago or more, and it's still your guiding star, is just wildly different than I could ever imagine myself doing. I am rambling into every situation, it seems.
Well, I mean, the secret there is like, don't be too detailed about it. Right. Each one of those steps was, the first step being find a place to stay for a week or two so that I can figure out other things. Go find a full-time job. From there, it's go find stable housing. Right, and then each step
you're taking vertical slices. I get it.
Yeah.
Right. What's kind of crazy is very agile. Right, it's just here's the outcome that I'm looking for, and each one of those steps gets me a little bit closer to where I'm trying to be, but without being overly prescriptive about the things. And the whole reason why it was go get a job at Blizzard is because I had just gotten into playing a lot of video games, and Blizzard with Warcraft 2 and Diablo were just mind-blowing for me. Like Diablo itself, I've got an entire story about that. And Square Enix at the time, right? So this is your Final Fantasy 2 and 3 in the US. Seeing both of those things definitely inspired me to try to get into the industry, to learn how to make video games, to learn how to make all of those things happen. So
that is super cool. But you know what? Firstly, I'm absolutely amazed. I didn't not know this about you, Dan. So, wow, just want to take a moment and appreciate, just the sheer tenacity that you've shown. Quick question. What is, I'm very intrigued. What is number 14 and 15 on your plan? I mean, you did the Blizzard thing. You still are 2 steps away from your goal. What are those 2 steps, if you can share them?
Well, without saying what those actual steps are, right? Because those have now happened a long time ago. I don't entirely remember all of them, but I'll give you the analog of that, which was a bit of a funny story when I was interviewing at Blizzard.
Yeah.
And basically, you go through this huge interview loop. Blizzard had a one-day, multi-day interview process. And I got sat down with the person who was the tech director over all of the BattleNet account infrastructure, a guy named Ali Vatani. And at one point, he's like, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I'm like, CEO.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
And he laughs, right? And he's like, okay, well, you're probably not going to, take Mike Morheim's position. I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, so really, where do you see yourself? I'm like, in your shoes. And then he's like, well, then what about me? And I'm like, well, I'm going to get you to the next level up. I'm going to put you in Mike's seat, right? And that's basically what those kind of final phases were, right? With one very small exception. And that is step number 15 was go make my own game. And so part of me leaving Blizzard and part of the stuff that I'm doing now is just getting myself set up for being able to make my own game at some point.
That's cool.
That is super cool. Yeah. All right. So you know what? Okay. Already an interesting life. You've done what you had to do. Archery. Where did that come from? Last time we spoke, you kind of told me a little bit about that, but I would love to. It feels so random. It feels so different.
It kind of was. So I enjoy hiking, right? And enjoy camping. My fiance and I, we like to go do that. Less than I think we hope to be able to, but definitely several times a year we try to go camping. And we have friends who also like to go camp with us. One of those friends, on a lot of occasions when we would go out, they would bring a compound bow. And they never, they didn't get to shoot it all the time, but it was always a thing of just like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Show me how a compound bow works. And compound bows, for the people who don't know, are the ones where, you see a bow, it has the wheels on the end and the strings going back and forth all the time. They generally have a whole bunch of doodads and gadgets on them. And so I tried it a couple of times, enjoyed it, and right before COVID, I bought a compound bow that I got to shoot for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then COVID happened, the entire lockdown. It went into a case, got put in a closet, totally forgotten about because, we're not leaving anywhere. So you can't really shoot a compound bow in your own house. But then at the end of COVID, and as restrictions were starting to lift, I had realized that I've been living in Southern California, right where Blizzard is, for 23 years. So my fiance and I, we kind of talked about that. We were originally thinking about maybe trying to move to a nearby location, a place called Big Bear, which is up in the mountains. And that's one of the places where we like to go all the time. But I don't know, just due to COVID, we were what if we did a much bigger change? And decided to moved to Seattle. So as the restrictions were lifting, once we made that decision about 3 months later, because, I'm kind of of the opinion, like, once you decide something, just go do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So about 3 months later, we're sitting up in Seattle. And while we're up there, or like, we started to talk to all of our friends. This particular friend was like, well, I actually always wanted to retire up into the Seattle area anyway. How about I move up too? And so we started to coordinate. Right now, we live 4 doors away from each other.
So this is the same friend who introduced you to that compound archery thing.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And since they were going to be coming up, I went, oh, well, maybe I should go find a range, right? Because, we're packing up
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, hey, my compound bow. Oh, I totally forgotten about this. So when I got here, I went to go find a range. And when I went in, I took a look at the place, was like, oh, this is really cool. It's about 15 minutes away from where I live. This could be, a pretty fun hobby for me to do to get out of the house, right? Because now I'm not working at Blizzard anymore. Definitely just to have been in the house, starting to do some contract work, starting to do some other stuff, and went, okay, well, I need a hobby that makes me leave.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a coffee shop around the corner from the archery range. I can go work there when I feel like, kind of being out in public. And so when I went in and I was looking at the place, I went, you know what? I've never actually shot a recurve bow, right? And a recurve bow is what you think of as like the classical bow, right? And so they set me up with one, and I took one shot from it and went, okay, I'm probably never touching a compound bow ever again. Right? And like I said, the idea was just a way for me to get out of the house, but I started to find that instead of leaving the house once a week, I was there 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week, and then 4 days a week, and then 5 days a week. And it went from being there.
Quick question. Sorry to interrupt you, because this is interesting. So you dropped your compound bow and you picked this because is it because it was more difficult than the compound bow and you like a challenge? Or what did you like about
right.
it?
It just felt right. It's entirely vibe based. It just felt like the right thing to do. Right? And yeah, so it went from me just going during lunch and only doing that once or twice a week to suddenly I realized I was there 3 to 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I was starting to do the calculus of like, oh, well, I could go home and play XYZ video game, or I could just go shoot more. And, since one of the things that we're kind of talking about is like, how do you balance all of those things? Well, ultimately something has to give, right? And I think one of the things that I learned from my journey through software development was in order to go get the things that you want, sometimes you have to give up the things that you have. And that can be really hard for people to do. But you have to just kind of be mercenary about what your real objectives in life are. And so this was one of those things where like I was going, you know what? I'm actually starting to get much more physically fit, right? Because pulling a bow is way harder than most people think. Particularly when you're doing it 120, 150 times per day at like 40 pounds per, right? Like ends up being a lot of weight, right? So I was starting to feel really good about myself. I was also improving at it, and it's easy to tell when you're getting better, right? Because you go from not being able to hit a target to suddenly like that ring of where you're hitting just keeps getting smaller and smaller, right? And as part of that process, I started doing less of other things, doing less of sitting home and watching TV and everything else, and realizing that it was buying me the ability to go do this.
That's awesome. Super cool. And I know I said like this feels completely different, but one question I have is, and maybe I'm doing a reach here, which is, was there anything in software development and your journey there that helped you in archery, or no? These skill sets are completely different, and nothing transitioned over at all.
Yeah, well, no, I think people who are hardcore gamers have a slight advantage potentially. Like this is actually one of the things I've kind of thought about, because I did go from a complete novice to one of the best very quickly. And anybody who's like a hardcore action gamer, somebody who likes to play FPSs, action games, strategy games, you end up with really good hand-eye coordination. And the big skill of archery is precision. Like, archery is an interesting athletic sport in that it's less about your endurance, your strength, and it's more about, can you do a repeatable process with sub-millimeter accuracy? And can you think of anything in gaming where maybe having sub-millimeter accuracy and a repeatable process that you do hundreds of times might occur? Because to me, that is every FPS, that is every strategy game, that is everything, right? And so I think that's something that definitely helped out, that once my brain kind of clicked of like, oh, I need to be exactly in this one spot over and over and over and over and over and over again. That allowed me to, within about 6 months, to go from the first time I picked up a recurve bow to one of the top 10 in the US barebow shooters. So.
Now, that was an incredible journey.
Yep. And like I said, it was a lot of fun. And just for people who don't know, or maybe know a little bit about things, I shoot a discipline. It's called barebow. So, we just talked about a moment ago about compound, where you have like the wheels, and generally you have a sight that's actually like magnified and a little bit of a scope. And the other style that most people know about is Olympic recurve. That's what you see in the Olympics. That's why it's called Olympic recurve. And they have like the big stabilizer bar out front, and they also
and those
have
eye thingies that they wear.
Some of them, yeah. And they also have something that's called a clicker, and it's a little thing that tells you when you've pulled the arrow back to a very specific distance, it'll like click up against your riser so that that's when you should be letting go. I shoot the same basic hardware as like an Olympic recurve, but without all the stuff. So there's no sight, there's no clicker. It's all just your own skill and everything else.
So it's way harder, way harder.
I would say it's harder to be consistent. Olympic recurve shoots at longer distances, so I think they're both the same. Like I think all aspects of archery are equally hard, but I definitely shoot the one that is the hardest on me as a person, right? As opposed to, do I have everything dialed in? Can I use the things that are available to me to the best of my ability? It's more of a, do I have some of the best ability, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you started at this range. You've gone from a novice to the top 10 in the US. How did that ambition keep growing? So what was the next step in your mind? You've also told, once when we were chatting on the side, you have this crazy tournament where it's not even like a single target. You'll have to go through the woods and like shoot random targets. That is just a phenomenal thing that I didn't even know existed. So I would love to hear the next part of your journey of archery.
Yeah, so going from top 10 to like one of the best in the country, right? That was me seeing competitions, and at first I was like, I'm not good enough. There's no way, right? Even though everybody at my range, the team that I'm shooting with, my coaches are like, no, you're getting really good. You should go try some tournaments, right? I was afraid of the competitive scene, right? Everybody kind of has this idea of what competition looks like, and one of the interesting things about archery is that you're only ever competing against yourself. Right? If I'm shooting an elimination match, right? I see a couple of those. I'm not even really competing against the other person. We're just both competing together to see who shoots the best, right? There is no me doing anything against them or them doing anything against me. There's not really any mind games or anything like that. It is just us standing there together. Who shoots the best shots, that's who goes home, right?
Wait, so y'all don't do trash talk? Like the soccer players or some other players?
No, particularly not in barebow. Everybody
they have weapons,
because we know how.
No, that's true.
Careful.
Yeah, that's true.
And my coach finally convinced me to go to my first tournament. This is actually a shirt from the tournament. It's called Indoor Nationals, and there's the national body for competitive archery in the United States as like an arm of World Archery, right? World Archery is the global archery group. There's USA Archery as the national arm of that. and they do a tournament called Indoor Nationals, and it gets held over a month long in multiple locations. In fact, it's going to be starting up here in about 2 months. And they convinced me to go down and shoot one. And so I shot the tournament. I thought I did all right. I go home, and I found out that I'm 7th overall. I believe it was 7th overall. And that's a huge thing, right? It's like, holy crap. Oh, okay. Maybe I could actually be really good at this, right?
Yeah.
And much like everybody's journey into competency, you get that first big win, and that's the first thing that drives you, right? Is you're like, oh, well, let me go do this again, right? And the thing that happened is, as I started going to these tournaments, I found out about the community, because to me, the archery community is an amazing community. It's relatively small, right? Archery is not a huge sport. And that community is for people from all walks of life, all over the place, right? Because it's a precision sport rather than a endurance athletics sport. It means that somebody can be a software engineer during the day and then go and shoot lights out during the night, or be a nurse, or be a high school student, or be pretty much anything, right? And everybody's on a fairly similar footing. So I got plugged into that community, and then that community started to help drive me, right? As I got to know people, and it's like, oh, cool, now I get to go to this tournament and see these people that I've met a few times now. And I, at a tournament called Buckeye, I finally got to where I made it to what's called a medal match, right? So generally the larger tournaments, there's going to be a gold, silver, bronze medalist. And I made it into the gold medal match, which I lost to a woman named Maggie. I think she was like 17 at the time, or 18 at the time, right? She's like the future of airbow, right?
Yeah.
And it was so amazing. It was such an amazing moment. And then to realize, oh, wait, this is a national level tournament. This is the best people in the country, and here I am shooting for second, right? That, plus then watching a bunch of people on streams as I was trying to learn how to get better, and going, wait a second, I think if I'm having a good day, I can shoot better than that. And
so that confidence kept building in you
right. And then it started to turn to, okay, well, let me go try to prove that. And that's basically what the last year was me going, okay, if I can really dedicate myself to this, how good could I be? Right? How far can I go? And it was definitely a lot of deciding to not do certain things. All of my friends are like, okay, when can we actually see you? And it's like, well, maybe in a month. And it got bad enough at one point that my fiance was like, okay, you need to tell me what day of the week I can expect that you're going to be home. Right? I need one day. You have to give me one day. Which means that Friday is like the day that I don't do anything. And that way we've got, time to be able to spend together. Right? But, beyond that, it was like pretty much everything in the past year. I haven't done anything if it wasn't archery or work. And it hasn't been like to burnout levels of things, but it's definitely been there's the thing you do, and then there's kind of the space in between, and you can fill up the space in between with, playing a game or watching TV or reading a book or whatever. But, there's a huge structure to my life now. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I mean, I'm just intrigued because you're doing both things full stream. Yes, you're saying that, okay, it's not burning you out. That's great. But there has to be a lot of dedicated, time management and prioritization. Without that, it's impossible to, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And having that regimented structure, and scheduled in my life, helps a lot with that, right? Where it's, okay, on Monday, from 5:30 until 11, that's the team shoot night. And on Tuesday is the workout day. And Wednesdays and Thursdays are free practice from this time to this time, right? Yeah. So there's huge blockouts in my calendar, which I have a daily life calendar now, which is not a thing I ever had before, that I keep track of and I keep schedule with. And it means that, I don't always have to do those things, right? Like if you're not feeling it one day, if whatever, then take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But, by and large, I've got a full calendar with 70 plus hours, marked out on it in between those two things.
I was watching a show about NHL hockey players, and they're talking about how similarly their life is completely scheduled almost down to the minute. I mean, these guys are nuts. And the one fellow was saying that some people look at how strict and full the scheduling is, and they think it's like, oh my gosh, how do you even handle that? And he was saying, no, this is what saves me. Like, I'm on the schedule. I just do my schedule, and it's crazy. It's for some of them, it's down to the minute.
Mm-hmm. And I think if most people looked really critically at their life, they'd probably find that they have an implicit schedule to begin with, right? I think a lot of people don't like that idea, right? They don't like the idea that they have their life schedule. But I know plenty of people that it's, okay, well, I make it home at 6:30, and then I generally take a shower, and about 7:30 we have dinner, and then when we get done with dinner, which is generally going to be at like 8:30, we're going to go watch a TV show, and then at 9:30 I'm going to go brush my teeth and get ready for bed. And it's like, well, you actually have a schedule. You just don't quite realize it because you haven't put it down and gone, well, you know what? I will actually make it regimented that at 7:30, this is exactly the thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, which is, so now this passion or this intrigue has turned out to be a real thing. You're now really, at the top of your game, and you've proven that this year. You're the 13th seed, I think, in the entire world, which is a phenomenal milestone. Now, how are you still balancing your day job, which is still coding, programming, and now this is also another real thing in your life? How just walk me through, how does that even happen?
Well, one of the ways that happens is I am working with people that understand dedication and directive, and I've been very fortunate. I think through most of my career here, in particular, I'm going to say with the leadership of Seeker, to give me the space to be able to do that, right? Because I think most people think of it as like, at least here in the U.S., that you have about 2 weeks off, for vacation and holiday time. I've spent way more than 2 weeks going and shooting archery tournaments, and we'll, with as much advance notice, make sure that I've got enough time that I can take those days off. And I've also, this is just part of that, like making sure that everything works correctly. Have talked to my company and gone like, hey, you have veto power, right? Like if you're ever like, I think this moment, due to funding and open play test and whatever, that we need you here right now, that you can just say that word and then I will be there. Right? That I can miss a tournament and it's not going to be the end of the world. And nobody's going to lose their job. There's not going to be a giant mess, a huge wreck. But one of those moments that could cause those things to happen, right? And so I have to be dedicated to be able to say those things and actually live behind them. And I also trust that they're not going to use something like that unless it's actually necessary. And as long as we have that trust with each other, then I can continue to do the things that I do outside of work where it impacts work. And I would say generally, every place that I've been at, as somebody who works extraordinarily hard at work, right? I work just as hard doing my day job as I do doing the archery side of things. That they're generally okay with the idea of doing stuff like that, right? Most companies that I've ever worked for, if you have a passion, they want to try to help you get to that passion, right? Because that's what helps you stick, right? When you're at a place and you're like, I feel valued and I feel like I can go be all of me, you're much more likely to stick around. You're much more likely to give everything that you can for that company. And that has been a thing that is like, at least for me, held true pretty much the entire career that I've had.
Absolutely. I think I think that's spot on. I think the relationship you share with your quote unquote employer or your boss, like I think that's very important to have that level of trust.
Mhm.
And so what?
Well, I have a question. I just
Yeah,
want to
Yeah.
mention before we move
yeah,
forward.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's important to note that that's a two-way relationship. That you
Mm.
clearly show the commitment to your work, and
Mhm.
as a result,
Oh yeah,
like
yep.
there's the two-way trust, and I think that's important because I definitely feel like some folks are like, well, how come they get to go do this thing, or how come this
Hmm.
and how come that?
Hmm.
And I'm like, you also can do that, but
Yeah,
you can't abuse it. Is the problem? Like it's definitely a little give and take.
That
absolutely
is
well
correct.
said. Yeah. Uh, and so, I can't help but wonder, there might be so many people in our, I mean, especially in the field that we come from, software, we're sitting on a chair coding, hours a day. It's important to get out, do something. We might be passionate about something, but we tend to curb our passion. So, Dan, what advice would you have for, people who want to pursue that passion? I guess you've kind of given a little bit of that answer already in terms of having that relationship
Mhm.
with the boss, but is there anything else that you've learned from your journey that you want to share?
I mean, like I said, for me, it's if you're passionate about something, go do it.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to give up certain things in some cases to be able to go do that passion. Be willing to do that. Like let things drop on the floor. It'll be okay. And the way that I approach this is I go, okay, on my deathbed, how am I going to feel about things?
Hmm.
And if I don't watch every single show from the MCU, I don't think I'm going to be sitting on my deathbed going, God, I really should have done that, right?
Yeah.
But using the tournament stuff, I just recently went to something called the World Field Championships, and that was the national representatives from all over the globe going and doing some of the hardest archery that you can do. And I'm going to take that with me for the rest of my life, right?
Hmm.
Even if I never pick up my bow again, I'm totally going to remember that moment and the fact that I was able to be there forever.
Yeah.
And you only get to do that by being willing to let certain things go. Some things that like are maybe easy to do, but may not give you as much value as you may think. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope that, I mean, you keep, picking up your bow and doing what you do. I guess I'll end with where do you go next? What's your next aim? Are you like, you're 13 seed now, you're playing competitions. Do you have like a aim? Do you have like an end state where you're like aiming towards as far as your archery is concerned?
I mean, I don't have any specific end state. As I kind of alluded to, my entire thing was how far can I go? Um, what's my limit? Right? Everybody has a limit. I'm gonna eventually hit it, and so I'm just gonna keep doing things until I find out where that limit is, and then once I found it, we'll figure out where to go from there. Right? I think I enjoy this enough that I will stick with it, even
Yeah.
if even if and when I find where that limit is. But uh, I once I find it, maybe I pick up something else. Maybe I go do something else. Maybe I find another thing to like go try my hand at. But regardless, it's still going to be a matter of I'm going to pour myself into you know whatever I get into,
Yeah.
and definitely as I said, it's archery, and it'll be that way for quite a while, and we'll just see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, this has been one of the most fascinating conversations. I really appreciate you coming to our podcast. Thank you once again, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having
Cheers.
me.